Okay, welcome back to our final episode, episode 7, in my series of videos highlighting possible NHD topics this year. I'm your host, Mr. Richards. Let's get started. For our final episode here, we are going to look at my top 8. I have top 8 topics I think are great for this year's theme, conflict and compromise. Now, I want to be clear that these topics are not a requirement, and you're not going to get extra bonus points, or I'm not going to, like your project any more because you do these topics, but these are just great ones that I think fit with both U.S. history and our timeline, and with conflict and compromise. And if I was doing a project myself, I would consider doing one of these projects. They are great. Alright, so we know our theme. We know that we have to fit between early American history all the way up to the Civil War. We know this already, so let's dive in with our number 8 topic, the Maryland Toleration Act. Maryland Toleration Act is during colonial America. What you have is Lord Baltimore Cecil Calvert. He is coming over, starting the Maryland colony, and he wants to invite as many colonists to come over and build up his colony as he can. So what he's going to do is issue this Maryland Religious Toleration Act, saying that you can practice any form of Christianity that you want. And this is big because in England and Europe, people are fighting Protestants versus Catholics, and even different colonies are staking their claim as what side of the religion they are on. And Calvert is going to come in and say, I don't care if you're Catholic, if you're Protestant, whatever, come on in, we need to build up the Maryland colony. So I think a really good topic would be checking out how he came to that compromise. Did he receive any backlash in England? How did this compromise between the two different sides of Christianity really help build up the colony? And, was there any conflict involved with this? Did this make anybody mad? So I think this is a great one for local Maryland history and for religious freedom and compromise in the early days. Great. That is number 8. Number 7, we have the Battle of Saratoga. We are in the middle of the Revolutionary War, and this is arguably one of the biggest battles, most important battles of the war. This is the turning point of the war, a huge victory for the American side. And what's going to happen is, by winning this battle, the French are going to realize that we are serious in our revolution, and they are going to join in to become our friends. So I think an excellent topic would be looking at the conflict side of this battle, looking at the details, how the Americans won, and then, but most importantly, looking at the compromise afterwards, the agreement of the French to become our allies, and that in itself is going to really push us over to win the war. It's going to be France that helps us with ships and troops and money and generals, and they're going to come in and they're going to really help us put us over for the win. So I think a great topic would be the Battle of Saratoga for the conflict part, and then the compromise later with the French allies. Next, the 3/5 compromise. We go to the Constitution. The writers of the Constitution, the Founding Fathers, are discussing, what do we do about slavery? How do slaves count in representation? Do all the slaves count for representatives, or do they not count at all? And of course, the South wants them counted for representation because that would give them more representatives, more congressmen. And so they come up with this agreement where each slave would be counted as 3/5 a person, and then that would be used for representation. And this is very controversial because a lot of people criticize the Founding Fathers for not dealing with slavery right now, for kicking the can down the road and not outlawing slavery right now. But the flip side is if they had not compromised to this, the southern states would have maybe said, no, we're not going to agree to this new constitution, and then the founding of the nation gets all thrown to pieces. And so you could look at, was this a necessary compromise to build up the nation, to start the young country, or were the Founding Fathers wrong in kicking this can down the road and it leading up to finally a civil war later on? So I think this is a great one to look at how compromise, helped them in the immediate, but maybe was not so great in the long term. I think this is a good one for compromise, and especially for African American history and maybe political history. Next, we have the Compromise of 1850. This deals with slavery also. This one is a big topic because what happens is, as new states get added to the country, we have to decide, are they going to be a free state or a slave state? And of course, all the free states want them to be free so they can have congressmen on their side, and then the slave states want power too, so they want it to be a slave state. So this balance has been going on for 30, 40 years now, and we finally get to the Compromise of 1850 where we have to decide, is California going to be a free state or a slave state? And what they end up agreeing to, and reminder, this is 10 years before the Civil War, is that California is going to be a free state, but in return, the South is going to get the Fugitive Slave Act, which is by far one of the biggest, most important pieces of legislation at the time. Fugitive Slave Act pretty much says any slave catcher can go into the northern free states and go ahead and retrieve their slaves. And this is big. It's going to really light a fire under the abolitionist movement, and other people like Harriet Beecher Stowe are going to write her famous novel in response to this. I think John Brown really had problems with this. So this is a great one because you get to see how a compromise, held off the Civil War for another 10 years, but in the end, did the Fugitive Slave Act help contribute to that Civil War? This is a great one for the conflict and the agreement in the short term. So, Compromise of 1850, that is number 4. Number 3, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4. We are number 4. Number 4, sorry. Whiskey Rebellion. The Whiskey Rebellion is an excellent one. You have George Washington leading troops into battle as president. This is after the Revolution, and he is president of the United States. What happens is these Pennsylvania farmers get mad about taxes on whiskey and their barley and their wheat, and so they end up rebelling, and Washington comes in and with an uncompromising attitude says, no, you have to pay this tax. And the difference here is, as under England we had no representation. Under Great Britain they didn't give us anybody to vote on it, but now Congress has voted and you have to follow the law. So you can look at really how Washington had this uncompromising attitude, how he was not willing to sit down at all with these farmers and talk it out, how he said, no, this is important, this is the law, and you must follow it. So this is a great one for being uncompromising, and how George Washington's actions actually, I think, helped avoid a bigger conflict that was brewing if the rebellion had gone on any further. But when Washington comes in, it ends pretty quickly. So this is a great one for uncompromising attitudes and how that avoided conflict. Number 3 on my list of top 10 topics this year, we have the Stamp Act of 1765. This is the one that's really going to kick off protests during the early Road to Revolution years. And the Great Britain is going to issue this stamp tax on paper and all kinds of other stuff, and it's going to really make people mad. And the Sons of Liberty are going to really start protesting, and the Stamp Act Congress is going to start boycotting no taxation without representation, and they're not buying British products. And so Great Britain finally decides to compromise, and they finally decide to get rid of the Stamp Act. So in the short term, the Stamp Act protests were very, very successful. But in the end, Great Britain comes back and they issue the Declaratory Act, which basically says we can do what we want, we can issue any law in all cases whatsoever, we have the supreme rule, you do not. You do not have the right to make these decisions for yourselves, American colonies. So this is a great topic where you could look at how, the conflict brewed over the Stamp Act, and then it was finally compromised. Great Britain decided to compromise and get rid of the Stamp Act, but did they really compromise, or did they really just try to, appease the colonists for the short term? Because they came back much, much harder later with the Declaratory Act, and later the Townshend Act, and then finally with the Intolerable Acts. So this is a great one for short-term compromise, not lasting, leading to further conflict down the road. I think there's a ton of different topics available for this, Stamp Act, and the Revolution in general, I think, is rich with topics. All right, number 2 on my list. Number 2 is the Bible riots. The Bible riots. These are happening in Philadelphia, and these are Protestant Native Americans, Americans who had been here longer, since the 1700s, 1600s, versus new immigrants coming in. So you got these, old school Americans who are Protestant Christian, the new Irish Catholic immigrants coming in, and they are butting heads, and they can't get along. And so these huge riots break out, and it's really a testament of the religious differences going on. And so I think this is an excellent an excellent topic to check out, the different religious conflict going on in the colony. It's in the states at this time. In early America, we're talking 1840s here. Immigration is starting to really pick up. And then you could look at how is this resolved, and how is it that today, Catholics and Protestants maybe not like each other that much, but they live alongside each other. So what had to happen for Catholics and Protestants to finally be able to live around each other? Irish are going to see a lot of, sentiment against them, a lot of hatred against them, and it's going to end up creating this huge conflict. So I think this is a great one to look at religious conflict and then maybe without compromise in there. So check this one out. This one's probably a really unknown one, but I think could have some real potential, The Bible Rise of Philadelphia. Finally, number 1. This is my favorite topic that if I was probably doing a project, I would think about doing it on this topic. This one is the Treaty of Ghent. This is during the War of 1812, and I'll explain why I think this one is such a great topic. This is going to end the War of 1812, and so you got the compromise here ending the war right off the bat, and it's ending a conflict between Great Britain and the United States. And what makes this so interesting is that when both sides agreed to this, neither side got really anything that they wanted in return. None of the issues that started the War of 1812 really got resolved here. So a lot of people like to argue that the war was kind of pointless. Fighting the war didn't make any sense. But you could make the argument, and I would make the argument, that this war was vastly important for the United States because, we felt more of like a nation. We get the Star-Spangled Banner. Andrew Jackson becomes a national hero at this time. So even though we didn't get the stuff we wanted from Great Britain, we got other stuff like a sense of unity and a sense of patriotism that we did not have before. So I think this is a great topic. But there's another element to it I think is really cool, is that the news of the treaty being signed, was slow to come from Great Britain. And so we have the Battle of New Orleans happen after the treaty was signed. So Andrew Jackson is involved in this massive, this big battle, that makes him a national hero. And the whole reason it happens is because neither side in America at the time knew that peace had broken out. So they are fighting, weeks after the treaty had been signed and the war was officially over. So you could look at how communication was slow and how, the Treaty of Ghent had been signed, but because of the era with slow communication, no one knew that the treaty had been signed, and so a conflict ensued in between. So I think this is fascinating to see how, the compromise finished the war, but, was the war really, did it have any point? What was the benefit of the war? And then also the conflict that happened after it because no one knew the compromise had been reached. So this is a great topic, I think, a lot of avenues to look at. You could look at just the treaty, you could look at just the Battle of New Orleans, you could look at Andrew Jackson. There's a lot of other different things you could look at, and I think this is a great one for you to dive into, especially since we got so much local history here in Baltimore for the War of 1812. So guys, this concludes my videos on possible NHD topics. I really hope that I got you brainstorming a little bit. Just a reminder, these are not all the different topics out there. There are dozens, if not hundreds of topics available for United States history, conflict, and compromise. So get to brainstorming, and I can't wait to see what you guys pick for your topic. Adios.